start now. I am Paul Krizak, the delegate from the 44th District up in Fairfax County, the Mount Vernon and Lee region. And welcome to our press conference today on issues concerning our workforce. And we do have a hard stop at 10 a.m., so it's 9:31, so we're really going to have to stop by 10. And I'm going to get started, and I may have to, I'm probably going to turn over the mic to Delegate Ayala. Thank you everybody for coming in a few minutes. So we're here to talk about one of the core issues that defines us as Democrats. It's our commitment to jobs and the people who need those jobs, who man those jobs, and what we want are good jobs with fair pay for an honest day's work. And no matter who the workers are, or where they come from, we want them to be treated fairly and get a good pay. So that's important as we build our Virginia economy, that we must ensure that all workers are treated fairly and afforded the same opportunities. We talked last week, I don't know if any of you were at the press conference last week, but we talked about the importance of raising the minimum wage and of training our workers for high-paying jobs. Today we're going to talk about the importance of protecting and respecting the rights of our workers to ensure that they can be productive in the workplace, and most importantly, they can support their families. Remember, a business is only as good as its workforce. And that's really what really drives me. I mean, you've got, these businesses need a good workforce, and the workers need to be treated well so that the businesses can thrive. So our caucus has filed, you can see behind me my colleagues, we filed many important bills to support working people this session, and today we're going to talk about just a few of them. We'll talk about the importance of paying our contractors a prevailing wage, and so the businesses pay their workers a fair salary, and the business that do pay their workers a fair salary can compete. And we're going to talk about how we can ensure the right of workers to negotiate and organize and negotiate with their employers, and how we can protect our workers who have been hurt on the job, and how we can ensure that those who work more than 40 hours per week are fairly compensated for their time. We're also fighting to ensure that workers aren't discriminated against for their salary histories, and we're fighting to repeal some, I call the old Jim Crow language in the code that comes back from 1964 North Carolina code that we then adopted in 1974 that intended to pay African American workers a sub-minimum wage. So the first bill I'm going to talk about, or we're going to talk about, is my own HB 667, and that's to adopt a prevailing wage for state projects. I'm just going to speak really quickly on that, and then I'm going to turn over the microphone to Delegate Ayala.
That's okay.
See, we have so many new people. I'm starting. It's taking me time to get to know everybody, but I really appreciate it. We're working hard together. It's a great team. So first, the prevailing wage. Enacting a prevailing wage would be one of the best things that we could do for hardworking Virginians. This is really a top priority for our caucus, for the Democratic caucus. A prevailing wage would increase the supply of apprenticeships and skilled workers. Most construction workers change employers when they move from construction project to construction project. And in this context, most construction employers have little incentive to invest in worker training. So a prevailing wage promotes kind of the high road, the best value, local economic development. It keeps jobs in the community. It discourages construction companies from driving down wages and cheapening the quality of the construction. So many opponents of prevailing wage argue that it drives up construction costs. This position ignores the long-term savings for construction companies they find in worker training, safety, and the broader historic impact on economic development. These arguments are kind of rooted in really a simplistic view that equates higher wages with higher construction costs. And in reality, construction cost wages are like 20%, 25% of construction costs. And considerable research shows that wage standards in general and prevailing wage regulations in construction in particular have several positive economic benefits. Prevailing wage does not raise overall costs, since higher construction wages are usually offset by much greater productivity, better technologies, and other employer savings. It also reduces construction injuries and workers' comp costs and raises health and pension coverage for construction workers. So this minimizes shifting the health coverage and other costs to the taxpayer and other employers and workers. Prevailing wages improve wages and economic opportunities for our less educated workers. Construction, is one of the last remaining sectors where workers with a limited classroom education can make a significant and dignified wage and support a family and do well in our Commonwealth. So I think enacting this prevailing wage is a way to grow the economic pie for all Virginians, and I'm very proud to patron this legislation and have the support of the caucus. And with that, I'm going to turn over the microphone over to Delegate Ayala, who is going to introduce her bill and the rest of the bills. And I must go because I have 3 bills in front of the Education Committee. So thank you very much.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Delegate Krizik, for letting me, or for having me, and the honor of speaking on your bill. Many of you may not know this about me, but when I was 24 years old, I found out that I was pregnant. I was single and working at a local gas station just down the street from my current home and making approximately $5.25 an hour, and saw no way out to support me and my son. I was not in a union, had no bargaining power, and in fact, I had no bargaining power to even negotiate my wages or even the ability to obtain health care. Things eventually got better for me. I found opportunities to educate myself and later build a career as a cybersecurity specialist. But it wasn't an easy journey, and it took a long time to get there. Along the way, I relied on public assistance. There are thousands of mothers and families like me, like that 24-year-old single parent, that might not have been able to afford to go to college, or they may not have the jobs or the opportunity, or be working at, they may be working at blue-collar jobs where they may be a gas station or in trades such as construction. When our workers are able to negotiate, they're more likely to be fairly compensated and less likely to rely on public assistance, like the one I had to rely on. That's why it's important for localities to be able to enter the project labor agreements, or PLAs, as they're commonly known. Now, just to give you a little background, PLAs, or project labor agreements, is a collective bargaining agreement for a specific construction project as it lasts for the duration of the period. PLA generally specifies the wages and benefits to be paid on a project, usually includes binding procedures to resolve labor disputes, such as strikes and lockouts. Current VA code prohibits localities for entering into labor agreements with multiple organizations working on the same project. This legislation, HB 8, would repeal and the prohibition on PLAs for state projects. It does not mandate their use. It gives states a better option to getting into big projects or getting the big projects done. PLAs made larger construction projects more effective and ensure the rights of workers are protected. Many of us in Nova or Northern Virginia around the Commonwealth know the cost and prolonged construction on our roads and interstates. We have felt the impact on our communities. Virginia used PLAs on phase 1 of the Silver Line during the part of this project. The construction was on time and on budget. However, phase 2 of the Silver Line. You know, more coffee would be helpful during this press conference. Mine goes 1,000 miles, but anyway, during the Silver Line, Metro Rail, the extensions of these agreements were prohibited, and we saw a drastic difference, and drastic difference that it made. The change has led to the inefficiencies and causes and delays and significant costs and overruns. Project labor agreements are good for business and good for workers. PLAs create a path for women, minorities, veterans, and other unrepresented populations. Developing qualified workers in the building trades, including people who historically are underrepresented in those trades, has a positive long-term economic benefit for individuals who receive the jobs and for the construction industry as a whole. Bringing back PLAs will ensure that projects get completed on time and on budget due to the supply of qualified labor and ease of project management, making large projects easier to manage by placing unions under one contract. Allowing state projects to reinstate these agreements will reduce the misclassification of workers and the underpayment of payroll taxes, workers' compensation, and other requirements that protect Virginia workers. And protecting Virginia workers is ultimately one of the core values that we as Democrats share. Thank you so much for this time and opportunity. And next we'll have Okay, so we'll go to Delegate Guzman, who will also speak on workers' comp bill. That'll be Bill HB 416. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, and I represent the 31st District, which includes parts of Prince William and Fauquier County. I am glad to be here today to fight for one of the issues that are most important for me, workers' rights. I'm talking about today about House Bill 416, which is workers' compensation audits. The worker compensations audits right now here in Virginia are unregulated. And that is the reason why we have so many workers getting injured without any type of insurance. My mandate will ensure that every insurance agent will require an auditor to hold a property and casualty license insurance, in property casualty. Currently, these audits are being conducted by clerks, payroll specialists, who have zero understanding of insurance coverage and its implications. Auditors are third-party payroll specialists, and these audits, most of the time, are announced and ask for documentation ahead of time. They send you a letter and they say the auditor will have only 30 minutes to speak with your employer, and you must have information available. Do not offer more information that has been asked for. So what is happening is that employers are not presenting the right information. When they're asked about payroll information, they only present employers who are getting pay stubs or W-2s. But they are not including information or subcontractors or 1099 employees, which according to the Virginia Workers' Compensation Authority, 1099 are employees, and employers must pay insurance, workers' compensation insurance for these employees. My initial policy, right now, the initial policy when it's written is more accurate because actually insurance agents are doing a thorough evaluation of the employees and the employer. But right now, when it's renewal, that is not happening because of these third parties. They are just looking at information that is given, and they are not actually inquiring for the right information. So we believe that this will help ask the right questions, but more importantly, enforce the right coverage. That will not only help employers to protect their employees, but also insurance agencies. But for me, most importantly, will protect all hardworking Virginians. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Guzman. Next, we'll have Delegate Sam Russell, who will speak on his bill that will protect workers from having to disclose their salaries, HB 240.
Good morning. Glad to be here and helping to represent the caucus with Delegate Bosco and G1 and Halala. We got all kinds of names going this session. So I'm trying to get to all of them. We're getting there, but that just shows you just how wonderfully diverse. There you go. Diverse we are. HB 240 is very simple. It is prohibiting employers from requiring your salary history from previous employment. And what's happening is both young workers and those workers who are in a career transition are experiencing real discrimination because of this. And so if you've got a job that's paying maybe 25 bucks an hour, and you've got a young worker who maybe just graduated, their last job, they were making 12 bucks an hour, and what's happening is, oh, okay, well, this person would probably be just fine with $15 and not paying them the $25 they deserve. The other side of that is there's people in a career transition, or maybe we're making far more, $80,000, $75,000 a year, and they'd be perfectly happy, and maybe in the last chapter of their work life, making $45,000 a year. A significant reduction, but it's doing something, maybe they have a strong passion, something that they love doing. And what's happening is that they're being discriminated against. And so what we're saying here is employers can ask the question, what is your minimum salary requirement? but they shouldn't say, what did you make before? Because it's preventing good people from getting into the workforce. And this disproportionately, in my opinion, impacts women, because women oftentimes, what we see are, they're the ones that are many of the care workers in their family. They have to take time off, whether it be to care for children or for others, pursue what we've seen, even to pursue further education. And so taking care of your family and making sure that you're there when your loved ones need you should not have this negative repercussion of, well, I had to go and work part-time to make a few dollars while I was caring for a loved one, and now I'm ready to get back in the workforce full-time. So I think we should end this process, which produces a lot of discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Rasool. Next, we'll have Delegate Lee Carter, who will speak on his legislation on workman's comp. This will cover bills HB 460, 461, and 462.
Thank you. I know time is running a little short before our hard stop, so I'll be brief. I think everyone instinctively understands that it's working people who put their bodies on the line day in and day out to make our country run. It's working people who are at risk of getting hurt on the job. And I think one of our most basic obligations is to make sure that when you get hurt at work, that you're going to be able to keep paying your bills. So for those of you that followed along during my campaign, you know that I had a personal experience with the Workers' Compensation Commission. You know that I found a lot of the cracks that people can fall through. And so yesterday I presented a package of 3 bills aimed at closing some of those loopholes that people fall through to make sure that when you get hurt at work, you're not going to get left behind. House Bill 460 was aimed at retaliation protection. Currently under Virginia law, you can be fired for getting hurt at work, and also because your employer doesn't like your tie. The standard says you can't be fired solely because of retaliatory intent. So that bill was changing that solely because to at least in part because. It's a very small change. It basically says, hey, if your boss is going to fire you, they have to have a reason that stands up on its own, not because of retaliation. 461 was aimed at making sure that employers don't drag on workers' comp cases for months and months and months without giving the injured employees the information that they need to be able to properly pursue their claim. And House Bill 462 was aimed at protecting 2 classes of workers. One would be people who work in Virginia, but they're remote employees of out-of-state companies. And the second class are people who primarily work in Virginia, but they get hurt on the job outside of Virginia, because if you get hurt on a business trip to California, you're probably going to be okay. If you get hurt on a business trip to Alabama, you're going to have an entirely different experience. Unfortunately, though I didn't think these would be party line issues, they certainly became party line issues. All 3 of those bills were killed by hard party line votes in the Commerce and Labor Subcommittee number 2. So it's become abundantly clear that when it comes to protecting working people, if that's something that's important to you when you go out and cast your vote, when you're looking for someone who has your back, there's only one party that's going to do that, and that's the Democratic Party. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it back over to Delegate Ayala, because we are running a little short on time.
Thank you. Next, we will have Delegate David Reed, who will speak on his bill, HB 472, to help protect our firefighters.
Thank you, Delegate Ayala. I also want to say thank you for everyone else for being here today. I'm David Reed. I'm the delegate from the 32nd District, which is the eastern part of Loudoun County. I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss HB 472, which is intended to address kinship presumption for our firefighters. Firefighters risk their health and safety every day to protect our families, our businesses, and our communities. Every day that these brave men and women go rushing into a burning building, they expose themselves to the known threats of the fire and the heat and the exposure of what goes on in the building. What we now know in our modern society is that they're also exposing themselves to the carcinogens that are unseen and that permeate the atmosphere, get absorbed into their clothing, and get absorbed into their protective gear that then will rest and that they will possibly be exposed to for several days later after that. We owe it to these brave public servants to be able to ensure that they and their families are fairly compensated when their hazardous work environment jeopardizes their health. And I'm proud to say that House Bill 472, although it did not pass out of committee yesterday, an identical bill to that, House Bill 1245, did pass by 7-0 and was referred on to the House Appropriations Committee to address this. So I have signed on to be a co-patron with that bill. I'm very, very pleased and very positive with the success that we had in moving that forward. The fact is, as I said earlier, we need to be able to take into consideration and address those individuals who put their lives on the line every day and be sure that their families and those individuals are fairly compensated when their job has then actually threatened their health and their long-term livelihood. So I'm very pleased to say that the House Bill 1245, which was the full text of the House Bill 472 that I introduced, has moved on, and look forward to working on that passage for the full committee and also for passage on the House. So thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Reed. We will next have Delegate Kathy Tran, who will speak on her bill on overtime, HB 1109.
Thank you so much, Delegate Halayala. I really appreciate you all being here today. I'm Delegate Kathy Tran. I represent the 42nd District located in Fairfax County. Virginians work hard every day to provide for their families, pay rent or mortgage, and juggle other financial responsibilities. It's extremely important that Virginians are fairly compensated for their hard work, including when they put in extra hours and work overtime. I introduced House Bill 1109 to put overtime protection in the Virginia Code. Overtime protections means that a hard day's work receives a fair amount of pay. This bill ensures that workers are fairly compensated for overtime if they work more than 12 hours a day, 40 hours a week, or 7 consecutive days a work week. Increasing overtime protections is a crucial step to growing our middle class and strengthening our Commonwealth. Virginians who work extra hours will earn extra income to be able to provide for their family, and they often spend it in their local communities, boosting and helping to grow our local economies. So I look forward to working with my colleagues in the House on this important issue and to support our working families. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate Tran. Finally, we have Delegate Ward, who will discuss legislation that would repeal an old Jim Crow law that kept wages low for black workers. I'm proud to be a chief co-patron in the voice of Delegate Paul Krizik of this bill. This is HB 1259. Thank you, Delegate Ward.
Good morning. Okay, House Bill 1259 is a bill that was patroned by Paul Krizik, and co-patroned by several members of this caucus. What this bill does, it would repeal the language in the Code of Virginia that discriminates against tip workers. The code explicitly bars newsboys, shoeshine boys, caddies on golf carts, ushers, doormen, concession attendants, and cashiers at theaters, as well as farm laborers and Virginians with mental, intellectual, and physical disabilities from minimum wage protections. Additionally, a waitress or a waiter who are subject to making a minimum of $2.13 an hour, as long as they accrue $30 in tips per month. That means that as long as they are making at least $8 a week in tips, they are barred from even receiving minimum wage, and that's ridiculous. If you think about a restaurant such as Golden Corral, and you know how those waitresses just run around from place to place, filling glasses and everything else, and they're doing it for $2.13 an hour, and they have to depend on you and some of your cousins not to even tip them well enough to make a living. And if this legislation passes, Employers would need to take the responsibilities for their employers and not force them to rely on the charity of strangers. When you think about those classifications, visualize a newsboy, shoe shine boy, farm laborers. What type of person do you imagine? The law was clearly written to economically harm people of color. The history of this current law is deeply troubling. Back in 1975, Virginia passed its own minimum wage law that was just copied and pasted from North Carolina's 1965 massive resistance era wage law. This bill will remove the discriminatory massive resistance era language and close a dark history in Virginia's history. The measure would also give economic justice to those whose learning capacity or whose earning capacity is affected by physical deficiency, mental illness, or intellectual disability. Last week, we just celebrated the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. Time after time, Dr. King made it clear that civil rights and human rights were tightly linked. Saying, for instance, to union workers in Memphis, Tennessee, back in March 1968. Now our struggle is for genuine equality, which means economic equality. For we now know that it isn't, wait a minute. Now our struggle is for genuine equality, which means economic equality. For we now know that it isn't enough to integrate lunch counters. What it means, what it does, what does it profit a man to be able to eat at an integrated lunch counter if he doesn't make enough money to even buy a hamburger? So racial justice and economic justice go hand in hand, especially when there are still laws on the books that are explicitly here to discriminate. We have to do better for our working people here in this Commonwealth, and confronting our past is an important piece of that progress.
Okay. We have another press conference in this room at 10. If reporters have questions, let's go back here outside and I'll connect you with our speakers for one-on-ones. Thank you.